For a long time, Buddy didn't make a sound. Not because he couldn't, but because silence had once kept him alive. He came carrying fear that didn't show itself, the kind that lives deep in the body and wakes up when the world gets loud. Healing came slowly. Quiet rooms, steady breathing, one small step at a time. Then one winter night, the power went out. Smoke filled the building. Every instinct told him to disappear. Instead, Buddy barked for the first time, and that single sound, in the middle of fire and fear, changed everything. Snow blurred the edges of Minnesota into something shapeless and white, swallowing distance and sound alike. Wind dragged itself across the open fields, slamming against metal and glass, leaving the world muted, tense, and waiting. The call came in late afternoon, just as daylight thinned into a dull, exhausted gray. Rachel Hale was finishing the last round of feeding when the office phone rang. One sharp sound, cutting through the low hum of heaters and the distant barking echoing down the kennel hall. She wiped her hands on her jacket before answering, already bracing for whatever winter had decided to deliver next. Animal control, intake transfer, juvenile dog, seized that morning. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression still, her eyes fixed on the frosted window beside the desk. She had learned long ago that the details that mattered most were often buried in what people didn't say. The officer's voice was steady, professional, almost too careful. When he mentioned that the dog had not resisted removal, had not vocalized, had not reacted, something tightened behind Rachel's ribs. "What breed?" she asked. "Golden Retriever, about 8 months, male, name listed as Buddy." Golden Retrievers were not supposed to arrive silent. Rachel ended the call and pulled on her coat, the familiar weight settling over her shoulders like a second skin. She was 34, tall and lean, with narrow shoulders and hands that moved gently even when she was tired. Her hair, a muted brown threaded with early silver, was tied low at the nape of her neck. Years in rescue work had carved lines of quiet focus into her face, not hardness, something closer to restraint. She stepped outside as the transport vehicle rolled through the gate, tires crunching over ice-packed gravel. Snow clung to the wheel wells, the bumper, the rear hatch. The engine idled roughly, coughing against the cold. The officer climbed out first, a stocky man with windburned cheeks and a stiff gait from hours in the cold. He spoke about paperwork and timelines, about a property investigation that had escalated, about conditions that had raised concerns. Rachel heard the words, but watched his hands instead. They never gestured toward the back of the vehicle. When the hatch lifted, a plastic crate sat inside, secured with straps. Frost filmed the ventilation slats. The crate itself bore the scuffed, cloudy look of something used too often, moved too roughly. Rachel approached slowly, lowering herself into a crouch so she wouldn't tower over it. Inside, Buddy did not look up. He was pressed into the farthest corner, his body folded inward so tightly it seemed almost intentional, as if he were trying to erase his own shape. His golden coat was dulled, the fur along his chest and belly tangled and flattened, still holding the memory of damp cold. One ear lay bent awkwardly against his head. The other barely twitched. His eyes were open. That was the first thing Rachel noticed. Not wide, not darting, just open, fixed somewhere beyond the crate wall, unfocused in a way that made her chest ache. They did not track her movement. They did not sharpen with curiosity or fear. They simply existed. The officer reached for the latch. Metal clicked against metal. Buddy's body went rigid. No flinch, no scramble, no sound. Every muscle locked at once, as if something inside him had slammed a door shut. Rachel lifted a hand instinctively, palm open, a silent signal to pause. The officer stopped, watching her with mild confusion. "It's okay," she said quietly, not to the dog, but to the space between them. She angled her body sideways, lowered her gaze, softened her posture. The techniques were muscle memory now, practiced through years of fearful intakes. She had seen dogs explode outward and panic throw themselves at crate doors, snap at air, scream until their voices broke. This was not that. Buddy did not try to flee. He did not growl. He did not whine. He did not collapse further. He stayed exactly as he was. A truck passed beyond the gate, chains clanging briefly in the wind. The sound carried through the yard, sharp and metallic. Buddy's chest hitched once, just once, before freezing again. The movement was so small, Rachel might have missed it if she hadn't been watching for something invisible. The officer cleared his throat. "He was like this the whole ride," he said. "Didn't move, didn't make a sound, didn't do anything." Rachel nodded, though her mind had already begun to separate this case from the dozens she'd handled before. 8 months old, juvenile, a breed known for social bonding, for softness, for seeking human connection. This level of stillness did not come from a single bad moment. She slid a blanket under the crate to shield it from the cold and asked the officer to sign the transfer papers. When the hatch closed again and the vehicle disappeared back into the white haze, the yard felt unnaturally quiet, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. Inside the intake room, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Rachel turned half of them off, leaving the far corner dim. She set the crate down gently, careful not to scrape it against the concrete. Buddy's eyes did not shift. Rachel sat on the floor several feet away, crossing her legs slowly so the movement wouldn't echo. She didn't speak. She didn't reach. She simply existed in the same space, letting time stretch thin. Minutes passed. She placed a bowl of food near the crate opening and slid it closer inch by inch. Buddy did not lower his head. His nose did not twitch. Hunger, fear, awareness, everything seemed sealed behind something thick and heavy. Rachel felt the familiar tension rise in her chest, the urge to fix, to intervene, to do. She forced herself to stay still. Rushing fear was how trust shattered before it ever formed. She studied him instead. The faint discoloration along his ribs, the way his paws were tucked beneath him, claws hidden. The shallow rise and fall of his breathing, counted carefully, as if too much air might be dangerous. Rachel had seen fear. She had seen dogs who lunged, dogs who screamed, dogs who bit from terror, and dogs who spun in endless circles trying to escape themselves. This was something else. This was what happened when fear had nowhere left to go. A memory surfaced uninvited, an old case from early in her career, a hound pulled from a chain after years of isolation. The same empty eyes, the same stillness that fooled people into thinking the dog was easy. That dog had broken apart weeks later, once the numbness cracked. Rachel's jaw tightened. She moved quietly to the crate and crouched again, this time closer. She did not touch the door. She did not say his name. She watched the way his pupils barely responded to the shift in light, the way his body did not orient toward sound or scent. Recognition settled over her slowly, heavily, like snow accumulating on a roof you didn't realize was already straining. This wasn't a frightened puppy. This was a dog whose nervous system had learned that disappearing was safer than reacting. Rachel exhaled through her nose, careful to keep the breath steady. Somewhere deep inside, the shape of the case changed, expectations adjusted, timelines dissolved. She straightened slightly, eyes still on Buddy, and the thought formed with painful clarity, quiet, precise, undeniable. This was not ordinary fear. This was trauma. Rachel learned very quickly that Buddy could not be rushed, not by kindness, not by routine, not even by silence. The room she chose for him was not meant for long stays. It had once been an overflow office, narrow and plain, with beige walls and a single window that looked out onto a snow-choked alley. She brought in a low mattress, thick blankets that held warmth, and a small lamp with a soft yellow bulb. The overhead lights stayed off. Brightness, she'd learned, could feel like pressure. The crate door remained open. That mattered. Buddy stayed inside it anyway. He positioned himself the same way every time, back pressed into the far corner, paws tucked beneath his chest, spine curved inward. His body language spoke of someone trying to take up as little space as possible. Up close, Rachel could see how young he really was, too young for the weariness etched into his posture. 8 months old, his golden coat should have been full and feathered. Instead, it lay uneven and dull, matted in places where hands had once grabbed too hard, or water had soaked in without warmth afterward. Rachel did not speak his name. She moved through the room with slow predictability. Every morning, the same order. Door opens, lamp on, food placed. Then she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and waited, her breathing steady and audible. Not exaggerated, just human. Buddy watched. He did not look directly at her face. His gaze hovered near her hands, the floor, the edges of the room. When she shifted her weight, even slightly, his muscles tightened. When she stilled again, they eased, but never fully. The first sign of change was so small Rachel almost dismissed it. She had placed the food bowl just inside the crate opening and stepped out of the room to give him space. When she returned, the bowl had been nudged backward by an inch. The food inside was untouched. But the bowl had moved. Rachel crouched, her heart thudding too loudly for her liking, and forced herself to look away before she allowed the thought to form. That inch mattered. It meant Buddy had extended himself beyond his frozen boundary and then retreated again. Choice, even partial choice, was everything. From that day on, progress was measured differently. The bowl moved closer by inches, not feet. Rachel stayed seated instead of standing. Sometimes she spoke quietly into the space, not directing words at Buddy, but filling the room with something consistent. Other times, she said nothing at all. Buddy ate only when she wasn't looking. If her eyes shifted toward him, even accidentally, he froze mid-motion, food untouched until she turned away again. Rachel learned to trust sound instead of sight, the faint scrape of his tongue against the bowl, the soft shift of his weight when he leaned forward. Sleep came in fragments. At night, Rachel checked on him before leaving. If the building was too quiet, if the heaters cycled off and the hallways fell completely still, Buddy remained rigid, eyes open, breathing shallow. But if someone sat nearby, if the room carried the low rhythm of another living body, his breathing slowed. Rachel discovered this the evening she stayed longer than intended. She had been sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, reviewing notes by the dim light. Fatigue crept in unnoticed. When she blinked awake, her neck stiff and her legs tingling, the room felt different. Buddy had shifted. He lay stretched slightly onto the mattress, not fully relaxed, but no longer folded tight. His chest rose and fell in shallow, synchronized breaths matching hers. His eyes were still open, watchful, but no longer empty. Rachel didn't move for a long time. She understood then that Buddy wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of being unanchored. The staff adapted quietly around him. Metal bowls were replaced with rubber ones in the back hallway. Doors were closed slowly. Keys were wrapped in cloth. No one asked why out loud, but everyone complied. Still, the world found its way in. One afternoon, a gust of wind slammed the exterior door at the far end of the building. The sound echoed faintly through the walls, a hollow metallic thud, distant but sharp enough to cut. Buddy collapsed instantly. Not a flinch, not a scramble. He simply folded downward, legs giving out beneath him, his body flattening against the mattress as if gravity had doubled. His eyes went distant, unfocused, his breathing shallow and rapid. Rachel was already on the floor. She didn't reach for him. She didn't say his name. She didn't try to pull him back into the present. She breathed, slowly, audibly. She let the room settle around that rhythm, resisting every instinct to intervene too quickly. She had seen this before, animals who learned that reacting made things worse, who survived by disappearing inside themselves. Minutes passed. Buddy did not move. Eventually, his breathing stuttered, then slowed. One paw twitched, not purposeful, just a reflex. His eyes flickered once, then fixed again on the wall. Rachel felt the truth of it sink deeper than before. The steps forward they were taking were real, but they were fragile. Not because Buddy lacked courage, but because his body was still living somewhere else, responding to echoes no one in the room could hear. Rachel remained seated until the room felt safe again, not fixed, not healed, just held. She made a note later, her handwriting careful and restrained. Responds to subtle auditory triggers. Shut down rather than panic. Requires consistency and proximity. Progress present, but easily disrupted. She closed the folder quietly. The sound reached Buddy before anyone noticed the vehicles. It began as a low vibration, a distant growl that slid under doors and into walls. Rachel felt it through the soles of her boots as she crossed the back hallway, an unfamiliar pressure, heavy and uneven. Outside, beyond the frozen alley, a diesel engine coughed to life, then settled into a rough idle that made the glass tremble. City repair crews had arrived unannounced to inspect a ruptured pipe behind the property. Rachel saw them through the narrow window, 2 trucks dusted with salt and snow, hazard lights blinking dull amber. Men in thick jackets moved with the efficient impatience of people used to cold deadlines. One of them, tall, broad-backed, with a dark beard rimed in frost, jumped down from the cab and dragged a length of chain from the truck bed. The metal rasped across ice with a sound sharp enough to split the air. Buddy disappeared. He did not run toward the door. He did not circle. He dropped from where he stood and slid backward, claws skittering, eyes wide but unfocused, body searching for somewhere smaller than the room allowed. Rachel heard the washing machine before she saw him, an old unit bolted into the corner of the utility room. Buddy wedged himself into the narrow space behind it, ribs scraping the wall, breath coming fast and thin. Rachel stopped at the threshold. She did not step closer. She did not reach. She lowered herself to the floor, back against the doorframe, keeping her body angled away so the space would feel open, not trapped. Her voice stayed low, even, ordinary. "It's okay," she said, not as a promise, but as a marker. "I'm here." The engine outside revved. A chain clanged against a hitch. The sound ricocheted through Buddy's body. He pressed harder into the gap until Rachel could see the faint tremor along his side. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just shallow breaths stacked on top of each other, air moving too fast to help. Rachel counted her own breathing out loud, softly enough that it barely rose above the hum of the building. In for 4, out for 6. She let the numbers stretch, the way she had learned years ago after a winter crash on black ice left her hands shaking for weeks whenever tires slid. She knew the body remembered things the mind wished it wouldn't. She stayed there as the afternoon dragged on. Outside, the men worked. The bearded one, his name stitched in block letters she couldn't quite read, gave orders with short, practiced gestures. Another worker, younger, hunched against the cold, passed tools from truck to trench. Their movements were efficient, impersonal. They did not know what their sounds were doing inside the building. Buddy's breathing stuttered, then slowed. His eyes remained fixed on nothing, but the frantic edge dulled. Rachel did not mistake it for calm. This was shutdown, not relief, the body choosing stillness because movement had once made things worse. When the engines finally cut, the sudden quiet felt too loud. Rachel waited. Minutes passed before Buddy's ears twitched. Another minute before his chest rose more evenly. He did not come out. He did not look at her. He stayed pressed into the narrow space as if it were the only shape that made sense. That night, after the crews left and the alley fell silent under new snow, Rachel stayed late. She filled out incident notes with careful, neutral language. Trigger, diesel engine. Metallic impact. Behavioral response. Flight to concealment. Rapid breathing. Shutdown. She closed the file and leaned back in the chair, rubbing her eyes with the heels of her hands. The room felt too quiet now, the way it does after a storm passes and leaves debris you haven't started to clear. Rachel was not new to hard cases. She had learned to pace herself, to keep compassion from tipping into urgency. But Buddy had slipped past her defenses without asking. His fear wasn't loud. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, deep and old, and asked the world to move around it. She thought about the way he had matched her breathing in the dim light days earlier. About the inch the bowl had moved. About how quickly all of it vanished under the weight of sound. Rachel recognized the other feeling beneath her concern and did not push it away. Attachment. And with it, the quieter fear she hadn't said out loud yet. The possibility that love would not be enough, that there were wounds no routine could reach, no patience could untangle. The fear of investing months only to watch a dog remain trapped behind the same wall of noise and memory. She stood and checked on Buddy once more. He was still behind the washing machine, eyes open, breathing steady but guarded. Rachel did not ask him to come out. She turned off the overhead light and left the lamp glowing low, a constant point in the room. At the door, she paused, hand on the frame, and allowed herself a single, honest thought. She had already begun to care too much, and she was afraid of what it would mean if Buddy never learned how to come back. The morning began with ordinary intentions. Winter had piled clutter into corners the way it always did. Salt buckets, unused crates, donation boxes stacked too close to the heaters. Rachel scheduled a short storage cleanup, choosing the late morning window when Buddy usually rested most steadily. She planned it carefully. Doors kept closed, movement slow, no metal dragged across concrete. It should have been harmless. The volunteer assigned to help was Evan Miller, a college sophomore home for winter break. He was tall and thin, all elbows and nervous energy, with sandy hair that refused to stay combed and a face that flushed easily when he felt out of place. Evan meant well. He always did. But good intentions did not make hands quieter, and experience was a teacher he had not yet met. Rachel was mid-sentence, explaining why plastic bins were preferred when it happened. The bucket slipped. Metal struck concrete with a sharp, explosive crack that echoed down the hallway and rebounded off the storage walls like a gunshot. The sound didn't fade. It shattered. Buddy reacted before anyone could move. He jerked backward, paws skidding on the icy patch near the doorway, his body folding in on itself as if struck from the inside. Momentum carried him sideways. He fell hard, scrambling once, twice, nails scraping uselessly before he twisted free and bolted. "Buddy," Rachel started, then stopped herself. He wasn't running towards safety. He was running from sound. The outer door had been propped open for the cleanup. Cold air poured in, sharp and biting. Buddy shot through it and into the yard, snow spraying beneath his feet. The fence loomed ahead, chain link rattling in the wind. He skidded again, tried to turn, and froze. A man stood just beyond the gate. Rachel saw him only in pieces, at first heavy boots, planted wide, a dark coat pulled tight around a thick frame, a knit cap pulled low over his brow. He was middle-aged, stocky, with a grizzled beard that looked more neglected than styled. His posture was confrontational without effort. Shoulders squared, chin lifted as if the world owed him space. He noticed Buddy at the same moment Buddy noticed him. "Hey," the man shouted, his voice sharp with irritation. "Get your damn dog." Buddy flattened. The man bent, scooped a stone from the icy gravel, and threw it not with full force, but enough to make a point. It struck the fence with a crack and dropped inches from Buddy's paws. The man swore, words slurred by cold and anger, accusing the center of letting animals run wild, of being a nuisance in the neighborhood. Rachel was already there, placing herself between Buddy and the gate, arms spread not in challenge but in boundary. Her voice stayed level as she told the man to leave, told him security had been notified, told him this was private property. The man spat into the snow and backed away, muttering. By then, Buddy was gone. Not physically, his body lay where it had dropped, pressed flat against the frozen ground, legs splayed, head turned to the side. But whatever had been present in him moments earlier had vanished. His eyes were open and empty, glassed over as if someone had turned the lights off behind them. Rachel knelt several feet away. She did not touch him. She could see his breath fogging faintly in the cold, shallow, and uneven. His muscles were locked so tight they seemed carved from ice. Evan hovered behind her, pale and shaking, his hands clenched in his jacket sleeves. "I'm sorry," he whispered, over and over. "I didn't mean," Rachel raised one hand without looking back. "This isn't your fault," she said quietly, "but I need you to step away." Security arrived within minutes. Statements were taken, reports filed, the gate was closed and checked twice. The rest of the cleanup was canceled without discussion. Buddy did not respond to any of it. They carried him inside on a blanket, his body stiff and unresisting. He did not lift his head. He did not blink when the lights changed. He did not react when the door closed behind him. Rachel stayed with him until evening, sitting on the floor, breathing slow and steady, offering presence without demand. The shutdown did not lift. It settled deeper. Later, after the center quieted and the storm clouds thickened overhead, Rachel completed the incident report. Her handwriting was precise, controlled. Trigger, sudden metallic impact. Secondary trigger, verbal aggression, projectile near animal. Response, flight, fall, total shutdown. She signed her name at the bottom and stared at it longer than necessary. Policy changes followed quickly. Visitor access tightened. Gates locked at all times. Volunteers reassigned away from Buddy's area. Rachel knew the steps by heart. She had written them before. What she couldn't write down was the fear sitting heavy in her chest. If this continued, if every sound, every stranger, every mistake reset Buddy to zero, then no amount of patience would move him forward. He would live in repetition. His body stuck, replaying a story that never ended. Outside, the wind rose. Snow began to fall harder, thicker, the flakes driven sideways by a gathering force that rattled the building's bones. Weather alerts buzzed on phones. A major storm was moving in, stronger than the last, bringing with it power risks and dangerous conditions. Rachel glanced toward the window, then back at Buddy's still form. She felt it then, sharp and unwelcome, the sense that something worse was coming. Something bigger than fear alone. And that when it arrived, Buddy would either disappear completely or be forced to choose something he had never chosen before. The power went out just after midnight. At first, it felt like nothing more than a pause. The heaters cut mid-cycle. The lights blinked once. Then darkness settled into the building like a held breath. Outside, the storm had thickened. Snow driving sideways against the walls. Wind howling low and constant. The backup generator kicked on with a strained hum, uneven and tired, the sound of a system doing its best. Buddy was not in a steel kennel that night. After the incident at the gate, Rachel had moved him to the quiet isolation room permanently, a converted office near the back, separated from the main kennel wing by 2 doors and a narrow hall. There was no metal latch, no bars, just a low barrier gate meant to mark boundaries, a soft bed pushed against the wall, and a loose safety lead clipped to a wall ring she rarely needed to use. Rachel had fallen asleep on the cot in the staff room down the hall, boots still on, jacket draped over the chair. Exhaustion had claimed her in pieces over the past weeks, and tonight it finally took the rest. The smell reached Buddy first. It wasn't thick, not yet. Just a faint bitterness riding the air, wrong in a way that didn't belong to winter or disinfectant or old wood. Buddy lifted his head, his ears pinned back, his body tensed, every muscle alert. Then came the sound, a soft crackle from behind the wall, not loud enough to alarm a human. Enough for Buddy's chest to tighten, his breath shortening as his nervous system prepared to shut everything down. The generator coughed. Somewhere in the office wing, an overloaded cable heated too fast. Insulation burned slowly, releasing thin smoke that crept along the ceiling, invisible in the dim emergency lighting. The fire alarm remained silent, its sensor iced over from the storm, power fluctuations rendering it useless. In the kennel wing, dogs began to stir. One whined, another scratched at the door. A chorus built metal claws against metal doors, rising panic bouncing from run to run. Exactly the kind of sound that had flattened Buddy before. He stood frozen for a heartbeat, eyes wide, the old instinct screaming at him to disappear. Then the smoke thickened. Buddy coughed once, a sharp, startled sound that surprised even him. His body surged forward before his mind could argue. He hit the low barrier gate, pushing through it with his shoulder. The safety lead slipped free from the ring, its clip worn from years of use. Buddy ran. The hallway was dim, red-lit by emergency bulbs. Smoke traced the ceiling. The noise from the kennel wing grew louder, desperate. Buddy skidded once on the slick floor, caught himself, and bolted toward the staff room. He barked. The sound ripped out of him, raw, loud, unpracticed. It echoed down the corridor, startling in its force. Buddy threw himself at the staff room door, paws scraping, barking again and again. Rachel woke, choking. Smoke burned her throat as she rolled off the cot, heart slamming. Before her mind fully caught up, Buddy burst through the door, grabbed the hem of her jacket in his teeth, and pulled hard. His eyes were wild, terrified, but focused. He turned, ran back into the hall, then spun, barking, looking at her, then back toward the noise. Rachel followed. The smell hit her fully now. Smoke. Heat. She swore under her breath and reached for her phone, dialing 911 as she ran. Her voice stayed steady as she reported the fire, the animals, the storm. She was already shouting commands into the radio, waking the night staff, calling names. They moved fast. Tom Alvarez, the overnight supervisor, appeared from the far end of the hall, early 50s, compact and muscular, hair shaved close, face lined from years of night shifts and winter call-outs. He had once been a volunteer firefighter before a shoulder injury ended that chapter of his life, and the training never left him. He took in the smoke, the alarms that weren't sounding, the barking chaos, and nodded once. "Evacuation," he said. "Now." They split up without discussion. Doors flew open, leashes snapped on, crates were dragged and shoved, blankets were wrapped around trembling bodies. The kennel wing was a storm of sound and movement, dogs barking, cats yowling, birds fluttering wildly in covered enclosures. Buddy stayed close to Rachel's leg, coughing, eyes darting, but he didn't bolt. He ran ahead, then stopped, barking sharply whenever she hesitated, then racing back as if to check she was still there. He led her to the far run where an elderly hound had collapsed in panic. Rachel scooped the dog into her arms, staggering under the weight, and Buddy stayed pressed to her side as they pushed through the snow toward the loading bay. Outside, the storm was brutal. Snow plastered faces, wind stole breath. The rescue's transport trucks were already idling, engines roaring. Animals were loaded quickly, gently, hands moving on muscle memory and adrenaline. Rachel passed off the hound and turned back again, lungs burning. By the time fire crews arrived, flames had begun licking through the office ceiling. But the building was empty. Every cage stood open. Every animal was accounted for. Buddy stood in the snow, chest heaving, soot smudging his golden coat. He shook violently, not from cold alone, but from everything his body had just pushed through. Rachel knelt in front of him, one gloved hand pressed to his chest, the other gripping his collar. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice breaking despite herself. "You stayed with me." Buddy leaned into her touch for half a second before pulling away, pacing, ears flat, eyes scanning the chaos. Sirens wailed, lights flashed, but the animals were alive. And somewhere inside the noise and fear, something had changed. Buddy had not disappeared. The fire left the rescue quiet in a different way. For weeks afterward, the building smelled faintly of wet ash and disinfectant. Temporary walls went up. Yellow tape marked off the damaged wing. Space heaters hummed where the furnace had failed, and everyone learned to walk around the gaps. Snow kept falling, softening the edges of the damage, as if winter itself were trying to cover what had happened. Buddy became a story before he became a dog again. Local news ran a short segment, no interviews with him, just footage of flashing lights in snow and a blurred clip of a golden retriever being led through smoke. People shared it with captions that made Rachel uncomfortable. Hero dog, miracle, brave boy. None of those words fit the Buddy she knew, the one who still flinched when a metal leash clip hit the floor. What mattered more happened quietly. Buddy still startled at sharp sounds. His ears still pinned back at the rattle of a gate. But now, after the fear surged, something else followed. He came back. It wasn't fast. Sometimes it took minutes. Sometimes it took Rachel sitting on the floor, breathing slow and steady, letting him circle the edges of the room. But Buddy learned to look for her when the world tipped. His eyes found her face. His body leaned not fully, not confidently, but enough to say anchor here. After the fire, those lines blurred. She slept lighter, woke at the smallest noise, replayed the night in pieces. The bark that cut through smoke, the tug at her jacket, the moment she realized they were still alive. When the center reopened fully, applications arrived. People wanted Buddy. They came with hopeful smiles and trembling hands, asking to meet the dog from the fire. Some were kind, some earnest, some chasing a story they could tell later. Rachel watched Buddy during the meet and greets, how he froze at unfamiliar footsteps, how he tolerated touch without seeking it, how he shut down when voices overlapped. She declined them all. One afternoon, Linda Park, the adoption coordinator, pulled Rachel aside. Linda was in her early 40s, petite, with sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses. Her black hair streaked with silver she refused to dye. She had a reputation for practical compassion, shaped by years of matching animals to people and watching what happened when matches failed. "He's not ready," Linda said quietly, not accusing, just stating fact. "But he won't be forever. We should talk about a foster plan." Rachel nodded, already knowing the answer she hadn't said out loud yet. That night, she stayed late again. The temporary kennels were quiet. Outside, snow drifted down in slow, patient spirals. Buddy lay on his bed near the office door, head on his paws, eyes half open. Rachel sat beside him on the floor, her back against the filing cabinet. She imagined Buddy in another house, new walls, new sounds, new rhythms. She imagined the first dropped pan, the first slammed door, the first stranger reaching too quickly. Her chest tightened. "You don't need a perfect ending," she whispered, not expecting him to understand the words. "You just need a place that doesn't change." The decision landed with surprising calm. Rachel filled out the paperwork the next morning. The adoption form felt heavier than it should have, as if the pen knew what it was signing. The Linda read it twice, then once more, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, her mouth softened into a small smile. "You're sure?" she asked. Rachel thought of the fear, the smoke, the way Buddy had chosen movement over disappearance. "I'm sure," she said. Moving day was quiet. There was no parade, no announcement. Rachel packed Buddy's things into her car. The worn blanket from the isolation room, a rubber bowl chewed at the edges, a leash softened by use. Buddy climbed into the back seat on his own, hesitated, then lay down facing the door, as he always did when he wasn't ready to turn his back on the world. Rachel's apartment was small and clean, tucked above a bakery that smelled like yeast and warmth in the mornings. She had prepared it carefully. No dangling cords, no metal bowls, a single lamp in the corner casting gentle light. Buddy explored in cautious arcs, nose low, steps measured. He found the rug first. It lay between the couch and the window, thick and dark, holding heat. Buddy circled it twice, then lowered himself with a long exhale that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his lungs. Night settled in, snow brushed the window. The city hummed distantly, muted by weather. Rachel turned off the lights and sat on the couch, boots kicked aside, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Buddy slept, not the light doze she had learned to recognize, eyes cracked open, muscles tight. This was different. His body loosened, his breathing deepened, slow and even. His paws twitched once, then stilled. He did not lift his head to check the door. Rachel watched for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile thing had formed in the quiet. When she finally stood, Buddy did not wake. She turned off the lamp and let the room go dark. Snow kept falling outside, patient and steady, covering the city in white. Inside, on a rug that smelled faintly of home, Buddy slept on without guarding the edges of the world. Sometimes miracles don't arrive as thunder or light. Sometimes they come as a frightened soul who chooses, just once, not to disappear. If you believe in God, then you know this. He does not always remove fear from our lives. Sometimes He places a small light inside it, just enough to guide someone else out of the dark. Buddy didn't become fearless. He didn't become perfect. He simply stayed when it mattered most. And that was enough to save lives. In our everyday lives, we are given moments like that too. A chance to stay, a chance to notice, a chance to be someone's warning bell, someone's shelter, someone's quiet miracle. If this story touched you, please share it so it can reach another heart that needs hope. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Your words matter more than you know. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can find their way to those who need them. May God bless you, protect you, and walk with you through every storm. And may no soul human or animal ever have to face the dark alone.